At 11:47 on a rainy Thursday night in Chicago, waitress Hannah Brooks stood alone behind the nearly empty counter of a small family restaurant, staring at her phone with tears gathering in her eyes. Her sister's wedding was less than 24 hours away, her mother was waiting for an answer she didn't know how to give, and the message on her screen had just made her whisper something she never imagined she would say: "I need a boyfriend tomorrow." She had no idea that the quiet man sitting in the corner booth had heard every word, and she certainly didn't know that he was about to offer her the most unexpected second chance of her life. If you believe kindness can change a life, that hope can arrive when everything seems lost, and that people deserve forgiveness and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes one small act of kindness becomes the beginning of an entirely different future. Hannah was 27 and had spent most of her adult life putting other people first. After her father passed away from a sudden illness several years earlier, she had abandoned her plans to attend culinary school so she could help her mother, Margaret, keep the family home. She worked mornings at a bakery and evenings at Rosewood Cafe, a modest restaurant tucked between two old brick buildings on a quiet Chicago street. She wasn't ashamed of her life, but she often wondered what might have happened if circumstances had been different. Her younger sister, Rebecca, had always been the more confident one, and now Rebecca was getting married to a successful architect named Nathan. Everyone was excited except Hannah, because Rebecca's future in-laws had spent months making subtle comments about Hannah's job, her modest apartment, and the fact that she was still single. The message on Hannah's phone had come from her mother. Margaret had accidentally overheard Rebecca's future mother-in-law telling relatives that Hannah would probably embarrass the family wedding photographs because she would arrive alone while everyone else had a partner. Margaret hadn't meant to hurt her daughter, but she had gently suggested that Hannah bring someone, even if it was only a friend. Hannah knew it was silly, yet after years of feeling like the family member who was always left behind, the thought of walking into that wedding alone suddenly felt unbearable. She wiped her eyes and returned to work, unaware that the man in the corner had been listening. His name was Caleb Morgan, a 38-year-old billionaire who owned a technology company headquartered downtown. But nobody in the restaurant knew who he was. He had come in wearing an ordinary gray coat because he had recently made a habit of eating alone in small restaurants where nobody recognized him. His wealth had given him everything except the ability to trust people. After his father died, Caleb had discovered that several people close to him cared more about his money than about him, and he had slowly become convinced that genuine kindness was almost impossible to find. That night, however, he had watched Hannah quietly give a homeless elderly man a meal without charging him. He had noticed her cover the cost with money from her own tip jar. When the man thanked her, she simply smiled and told him everyone deserved a warm meal on a cold night. Caleb had been moved by something he couldn't explain. When Hannah finally returned to the counter, Caleb gently asked if she was all right. Embarrassed, she explained that she had a family wedding the next day and needed someone to accompany her because she couldn't face another room full of people treating her like she was less important. Then, half laughing and half crying, she admitted that she had jokingly told herself she needed a boyfriend by tomorrow. Caleb surprised her by saying he could help. Hannah thought he was joking. But Caleb wasn't asking for anything romantic or inappropriate. He offered to accompany her as a respectful guest, nothing more. He told her she didn't owe him anything, and if she changed her mind at any point, he would understand. What Hannah didn't know was that Caleb had a completely different reason for agreeing. His grandmother, Ruth, had once told him that the greatest test of wealth was whether you could use it to make someone else feel valuable without making them feel indebted. The next afternoon, Caleb arrived at Hannah's apartment wearing a simple navy suit. Margaret nearly dropped the flowers in her hands when she saw him. Hannah's eyes widened too, because the quiet restaurant customer looked completely different dressed for a formal wedding. Still, he behaved exactly as he had the night before, humble, patient, and considerate. At the wedding, the people who had underestimated Hannah suddenly became curious. Rebecca's mother-in-law tried to impress Caleb with questions about his career, but Caleb simply smiled and changed the subject back to Hannah. He never bragged about his company. He never mentioned his fortune. Instead, he spent the afternoon making sure Hannah's mother had a comfortable seat and helping an elderly relative find her way through the crowded reception hall. Then came the moment that changed everything. During the reception, Hannah's mother discovered Caleb's identity through a business article on her phone. She looked at Hannah in disbelief, and within minutes the truth spread through the family. The man they had assumed was Hannah's ordinary boyfriend was one of the wealthiest young entrepreneurs in Illinois. Hannah immediately feared the worst. She thought Caleb would be angry that people had discovered his secret. Instead, he looked at her and smiled. He told her that for the first time in years, he had attended an event where nobody had tried to impress him before knowing his name. He had watched Hannah care for everyone around her while believing she was the least important person in the room. That was the moment he realized she had more wealth in her heart than many people he had met in boardrooms. But Caleb didn't suddenly become Hannah's boyfriend. He did something far more meaningful. He offered to invest in her dream of opening a small bakery, not as charity, but as a business partnership. Hannah had almost forgotten that she once wanted to become a chef. Months later, Hannah opened Brooks and Butter, a warm little bakery on the same Chicago street where Rosewood Cafe had stood. Her mother handled the books, Rebecca became a regular customer, and Caleb visited every Sunday morning without bodyguards or expensive cars. 1 year later, Hannah stood behind the counter watching customers laugh over coffee and fresh bread. She finally understood that she had never needed a boyfriend to prove her worth. She had needed someone to remind her that her dreams were still alive. And Caleb learned something too. Sometimes the richest person in the room isn't the one with the largest bank account. Sometimes it is the person who has very little, yet still finds enough to give away. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that kindness can appear when we least expect it, please support this video with a like, share your thoughts, and subscribe so more stories of hope and second chances can reach people who need them. Before you go, leave a comment telling us one thing. Have you ever received an unexpected act of kindness that changed the way you saw your life? Because sometimes, the person who steps into your life for one night doesn't become the love story you expected. Sometimes, they simply help you find your way back to yourself, and that can be an even greater gift.